Harsher moral judgments can even be induced following the consumption of a bitter drink, because people are often disgusted by bitterness. In addition, the same disgust-related facial expressions are observed in response to unpleasant tastes, disgusting photographs, and receiving unfair treatment in an economic gain. So our sense of justice, that's a weird thing. Our sense of justice seems to be, who would guess that, eh? That it's centered in our, you know, from a biological perspective in the systems that mediate disgust. So I've seen this, you know, among people who've received an injustice, you know. So something's been done to them that's not good. And they're often unable to let it go, partly because they're disgusted with themselves for not responding to it properly. It's like, you know, if someone throws a dart at you, and then it's like you have a moral obligation to respond to that, right? And you can think about it as anger or something like that, but part of it also seems to be that you're ashamed if you don't respond. And you can see that sort of thing happening in cultures of honor, you know, where if purity is violated, you see these in these situations where, you know, a father maybe kills his daughter, which happens reasonably often because she's violated some sort of social norm. Part of the idea is that, well, you know, if you don't respond harshly to something that's associated with disgust, then you bring dishonor on your entire family and maybe on your entire community. And, you know, we don't like that sort of thinking in the West, but the reasons that we don't approve of that sort of thinking, we think it's because we're liberal, but I think the evidence suggests that the reason that we don't approve of those sorts of behaviors is because we live in a very clean environment and we have plumbing. And so there's all sorts of things that we do that reduce the probability that we're going to be contaminated by parasites or infectious diseases. And so that means that we don't feel that it's necessary to respond as harshly to moral transgressions. And you know, you might think, well, I doubt it, but let me show you the evidence because it's unbelievable. Concerns about cleanliness and feelings of disgust have likewise been related to political attitudes. Situational reminders of the importance of physical cleanliness, such as asking participants to wipe their hands with antiseptic wipes, tends to increase self-reported political conservatism. Such a finding is consistent with the notion that purity tends to be valued more by conservatives than by liberals. Individuals who report being disgusted more easily also tend to hold more conservative political views on topics including abortion, gay marriage, tax cuts, and affirmative action. In addition to the effects that have emerged when using self-report disgust sensitivity, more conservative political views have also been associated with stronger physiological reactivity to disgusting images. We found that conservatives are not only more aroused by disgusting stimuli, they're more aroused by any stimuli. Happiness, hunger, fear, you name it. It affects the conservative more than the liberal. And then we've also found that if you take undergraduates and you expose them to videos that induce various physiological states, happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, and then we also ask people how long it was since they last ate. Well, if you put people in one of those emotional or motivational states and then you show them political speeches, the more emotional they are, or the hungrier, the more they like conservative speeches. So that was actually very interesting. So, a large literature has converged on the notion that there are two core dimensions of conservative political ideology: resistance to change and tolerance of inequality. Okay? Resistance to change reflects the extent to which people wish to maintain the status quo, while tolerance of inequality reflects the acceptance of an unequal distribution of resources and opportunities within society. You know, and so there's sort of the idea that the best rise to the top, and the best is a moral judgment, and the top is the right place for the best people to be. And then you might ask, well, why is the top the best? I mean, why do we assume that the top of a dominance hierarchy is the right place to be? Well, part of it is, of course, that the closer you are to the top of a dominance hierarchy, especially if you're male, the more likely it is that you're going to, you know, be attractive to people of the opposite sex. So that's partly it. But then this other thing seems to be, well, it's actually it is a better place to be at the top because it's cleaner and safer and there are more resources there. And so that accounts at least in part for the judgment of the people who are at the bottom of the hierarchy. So these two dimensions appear roughly aligned with social and economic conservatism as expressed in the constructs of right-wing authoritarianism and social dominance orientation, respectively, which you can measure hypothetically with questionnaires. So These core facets of conservatism are also closely related to two higher order value dimensions described in moral foundations theory, which reflect preferences for order and tradition on the one hand and preferences for egalitarianism on the other. Okay, so we'll leave that part. Political conservatism can thus be thought of as a social immune system reflecting the extension of pathogen avoidance mechanisms to the integrity of the social system. Just as the behavioral immune system has been conceptualized as helping to maintain the purity and integrity of an individual body, so too may the same pathogen avoidance system help to maintain the abstract integrity of the social order. In particular, the social immune system would help to maintain order by suppressing any actions or individuals that deviate from a group's accepted social traditions. So, it has been reported, for instance, that regions with higher levels of disease prevalence tend to be associated with higher levels of social conformity and autocratic rule. Individuals who feel more vulnerable to disease likewise report higher levels of ethnocentrism and xenophobia. Such basic concerns about pathogen avoidance may thus contribute to the desire for order and tradition among conservatives, along with the harsh moral judgments associated with violations of the social order. In particular, severe moral judgments may be a key mechanism by which the social immune system, instantiated in conservative practices and policies, aims to eliminate exposure to deviant social elements that may increase the risk of pathogen exposure.